Hello, my name is Darrell Stiffler. I am a professional project manager. I was certified by the Project Management Institute in September of 1999, so I've been a PMP for a long time. My certification number is around 12,000. Now there's over 500,000 PMPs throughout the world, so I got on the ground floor, and I'm very pleased that I did. I'm going to share with you some thoughts and some secrets about project management that I hope you will find useful. There are two secrets to success while taking this training course. The first secret is don't think that you can multitask. Lots of people think they can multitask. I have heated conversations with my sister all the time. She thinks she can multitask. Now, let's talk about doing two things at the same time. Now, can you do two simple things like eat popcorn and watch television at the same time? That's multitasking. Sure it is. But you lose a little bit in each one of those efficiencies when you're doing it. When you're watching television, if you glance down to grab a handful of popcorn, you may miss an important scene in the television show. Or if you keep your eyes fixed upon the television, you may drop popcorn all over your lap. So focusing on one thing is the best thing, okay? For example, the more complicated the two tasks are, the more time it takes to switch back and forth. If you're reading a very complicated, say a contract or a document that's got lots of details, trying to switch from that to a conversation with someone else can be more difficult. It takes you longer to find out where you were. So don't think you can multitask. Don't try to multitask. You're here for training. Someone paid a lot of money for you to be in this class. You want to make sure you get your money's worth. If your boss paid for it, he'll be happy that you focused on your training today, and then you can do your work when you get back. It's very important. So focusing on what you do, that's the second secret. So focusing on what you want to do is very important. Discover magazine says that you have 50 thoughts per minute. That's almost a thought per second. Your mind seems to go everywhere. And while you're in this class, you really need to focus on what I am saying and on what the course material says. Try to compartmentalize yourself. What does that mean? Compartmentalize says, okay, now that you're in class, you focus on what I'm saying in class, and when you get on a break, then you can change your focus or your compartmentalization back to other thoughts. But try to find an object in this room, like the lectern or a piece of furniture, that every time you look at that, it's a reminder for you to go back and focus on what's being said, okay? When I give you a definition, it's very important that you memorize that definition exactly as I say it. Or if you read a definition, to remember exactly how you read it. Trying to come up with your own words to make yourself more comfortable with the definition won't work. You have to memorize the definition precisely, okay? Those are my two secrets for success for the class. Okay, I want to talk to you about the most important document that you will create in a project. It's called the project charter. Now the project charter has many things in it, okay? But we're going to focus on a couple of things precisely today, and we'll discuss the others in another class. The two things I want to talk to you about are assumptions and constraints. Now, an assumption is, definition, something that is believed to be true at this time but cannot be proven, okay? We make assumptions all the time, okay? It's very important that you document that assumption, because if it's a multi-year project and you get down the road and you find out you're out of budget, why are you out of budget? Maybe you have to go back to the original assumptions. Maybe your original assumption is that you're going to have a semi-truck, a fleet of semi-trucks driving from Dallas-Fort Worth to California on a weekly basis. And you might make the assumption that gasoline or diesel fuel will be running somewhere between $3 and $3.50 per gallon. 2 years down the road, gasoline may be at $4 or $5 a gallon, who knows, or diesel fuel will be at $4 or $5 a gallon. Your cost will be just out of sight. So you're going to say back at that time, well, how come we're so far out of budget? Well, you go back and see your documentation says that you assume that the gasoline or diesel fuel would be in that price range, and it's different. So make sure and document all your assumptions. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is constraints. Okay, I'm going to do a little history on constraints. Okay. When I first began project management many years ago, as a project manager, I would go to my customer and I would say, okay, we're going to do the 3-card model. Okay? 3-card model is you have faster and cheaper. You can only have 2 of those cards, Mr. Customer. Which 2 do you want? Well, of course, the first reaction says, I want all 3, and you tell them, no, you can't have all 3. You have to have 1 or 2 of the 3. So they say, okay, I want it better and faster. Okay, Mr. Customer, you want it better and faster? Does that mean you don't care how much money I spend? Well, no, they're going to be saying, no, I'm worried about the budget, so it'd be cheaper and faster. Okay? So that means you don't... Yeah, I want it better and faster. Okay? That means you don't care how much it costs. If you say, I want it faster and cheaper, that means you don't care about the quality. So as you can see, they're in a real dilemma. They get frustrated, but you have to qualify. Those are all constraints. What is a constraint? A constraint is a limitation or an impedance to the project being completed the way you want it completed, okay? We all have limitations. You as a project manager have to understand what those constraints or limitations are and therefore work around them, either eliminate them or work around them. There's several ways of doing that, okay? So we talked about the 3-card trick or 3-card model, better, faster, and cheaper. After the 3-card model, they came out with another model. It's called the triple constraint model. Okay, so I'm going to do some hand gyrations, and this is very important. Believe me, you will appreciate it later on. But the triple constraint model actually has 4 items in it. Okay, first I want you to imagine me a doctor with a stethoscope around my neck. Okay, so down here we have a scope. Okay. That's your first constraint is a scope. The scope is all the things that you have to perform necessary to complete the project. So you have a scope. And the next thing I want you to notice that on this hand I've got a watch. Okay? So you have a scope, which is a limitation or a constraint. You have time, which is a constraint. Okay? Also, I want you to notice on this hand, this arm here, this is a cuff length. This is a very expensive cuff length. Matter of fact, if you could see it close enough, it has the label for the House, the United States House or Congress, so you know they spend a lot of money. So let's look at this again. I want everyone to put their hands up like this. Say scope, time, cost, and the 4th thing in the triple constraint model is quality. And you're a quality person, I'm a quality person, so I always go like this, quality. So the triple constraint model, or your limitations, is scope, time, cost, and quality. Okay? So I want you to practice this. Okay? Put your hands up. I want you to mentally go through that. Scope, time, cost, quality. Got that? Okay. Remember that and practice that. When the PMBOK, or Project Management Body of Knowledge, came out from the 4th to the 5th edition, and by the way, if you'll notice the cover of the PMBOK, or the Project Management Body of Knowledge, it says a guide. What does that mean? It means it's just a guide. It's not everything you need to know to pass the PMP examination or the CAPM. It's a book of best practices that the Project Management Institute recommends, but it's not all that. You need to know more than what's in the PMBOK to pass the test, okay? But when they went from the 4th edition to the 5th edition, they went to a new type of constraint model. They listed 6 different constraints. Now, I took those 6 different constraints and I wrote a white paper. If you Google my name, Darrell G. Stiffler, you will find the white paper called the Stiffler Hexagon Constraint Model. And what I did, the PMBOK does not put the 6 constraints in any particular order, but I did. One of the things that I found by being a project manager over the years is that the first thing you do when you walk into the boss's office and say you've got a new project that you want to do, and you kind of give him a little details, and then he's going to ask 1 or 2 questions first. But he's going to ask you 2 questions. It's going to be, how long is it going to take, and what's it going to cost? I've faced that all these years of being a project manager. And when I formed the Stiffler Hexagon Constraint Model, I changed the order. I changed the order to quality should be the first question. You have to define and decide on what level of quality you want for the project. Once you define or decide the quality of the project, then you can go to the other 6 constraints, which the next constraint I say is scope. Well, what's it going to take to produce a quality project? The next thing is what the budget's going to be for producing this project. The next is going to be what resources are you going to need to produce this project. And the next is risk. Then the next is schedule. So that's your 6 constraints. Quality, scope, budget, resources, risk, and schedule. Now this is an iterative process. Well, what's an iterative process? An iterative process means that you may go from quality to scope to budget. And when you get to budget, you're going to say, gee whiz, I can't spend that much money producing this good a quality, so I've got to go back and change the quality level that I want before I can go into the scope and then get it within the budget. So it's an iterative process. You'll be going back and forth as you go around. You get down to schedule. It may be that your schedule to produce it within this budget range is going to be too fast or too long, so therefore you have to go back and re-examine it. So it's an iterative process as you go through that. So that's the Stiffler Hexagon Constraint Model. Okay, based on that. The next thing, there's 2 major things that the Project Management Institute emphasized. One is the 5 process groups, and we'll talk about that later. But the second thing is the 10 knowledge areas. When they went from PMBOK 4 to PMBOK 5, they went from 9 knowledge areas to 10 knowledge areas. Okay? The 10 knowledge areas are integration, scope, time, cost, quality, human resources, communication, risk, procurement, and stakeholders management. So let's talk about those, each one of them. What is integration? Well, think of integration as a project manager is pulling it all together. Okay? I use the analogy a music conductor. A person that is a music conductor doesn't need to know how to play every instrument in the orchestra. No. They need to know the capability of that instrument and the range of that instrument before they can start conducting. You as a project manager must know your resources and skill sets that you're going to bring in on this project. Okay? And you're going to be able to bring them all together. For example, you may need a database administrator. You don't know how to be a database administrator. You don't have to, but you have to know what a database administrator does. So you can integrate them in with, say, the marketing people. So when I think of integration, think of this, conducting the orchestra. Okay? So that's your first knowledge area. Now what are the next ones? Well, remember the old triple constraint model, scope, time, cost, and quality? That's the next 4. Okay, so you have integration, scope, time, cost, quality. And if you're going to have a project, you're going to have people. I use this as a symbol for people. Okay? Okay, this is people, human resources. If you're going to have people, you're going to have what? Communications. This is my communication hand signal. Okay? So you have communication between 2 people. Hey, babe, you got great knuckles. Oh, really? You think so? Or, hey, babe, you got great knuckles. Oh, you can. Let's focus more on the slide. It is a PM's responsibility to communicate with the team And they must know what they're going to do, and what they must do will be defined in your roles and responsibilities that you filled out. I chose these two different icons on the slide for a couple of different reasons. The first one, where it shows the skulls and the electric bolts bouncing back and forth. What I'm trying to communicate with you is that communication with the team is more than just conversation. We communicate through body language. Matter of fact, I've heard numbers up to 90% of communication is body language. Also, intonation, inflection, and voice has a great deal to do with communication. And there's some communication done through beta beams. So that's the reason why I chose this icon with the skulls and electric bolts. The other icon that I chose, it shows the ring there with the PM in the center. And I wanted to bring out the point about the channels of communication and the formula below that, the n minus 1 divided by 2. And that formula is something that you're going to need to learn how many lines of communication you're going to have to set up based upon your team. So let's take this formula and use 5. Let's say you have 5 team members. So if you did the mathematics, you had 5. And then the n minus 1, that would be 4. And if you multiply those together, 5 times 4 is 20. And then you divide by 2 is 10. So you would have 10 channels of communication if you had 5 people. So let's go ahead and do another formula. Let's say you have 10 people. So if you have 10 people on your team, so you have 10 times n minus 1, which would be 9. So 9 times 10 is 90 divided by 2. So now you have 45 channels of communication. So you can see channels of communication increase dramatically based upon the number of people on your project team. Risk. Let's focus more on the slide and let's read it. Project management and team must identify, evaluate, plan response, and track risk. Very important to identify as many risks as you possibly can. Along with your team, you also probably should speak with your customer as well, because your customer will probably be more aware of any risks that might happen during the project than you or your team members. Also, you can go to outside sources. I mean, there are companies out there that make their living on identifying risk, which are, of course, insurance companies. So it'd be good to consult an insurance company to see if you can possibly buy insurance against any risk that may pop up on the project. Okay, on procurement, let's focus more on the slide and let's read that. Purchase the correct amount at the correct time, at the correct price, and the correct quality. What would be correct? Well, correct would be upon your definition of quality that you made when you're going through your quality exercise. So procurement is very important in making sure that the person who does the procurement, and lots of companies use purchasing departments, so you want to make sure your purchasing department is aware of the quality that you want to produce on this project. After you have procurement, then the last thing of the 10 knowledge areas is stakeholders. You are stakeholders. So let's review it. You have integration, bringing everyone together, scope, time, cost, quality, human resources, communication, risk, and procurement, and finally, stakeholders. Those are your 10 knowledge areas. Hope you've enjoyed this brief lecture. I hope you found it useful. So let's summarize. We talked about project charter a little bit. We need to talk a lot more about the project charter, which is the most important document for a project. We talked about assumptions, which is something we believe to be true at this time, but can't prove. We talked about constraints. It was a limitation or something that will impede the progress or the completion of the project. And then we talked about the 10 knowledge areas. I've had a good time. If you'd like to know more, contact me, Darrell Stiffler. Thank you.